Hello, everyone. I'm Ed Amorosa from Tag Cyber, and I'm here with my colleague and friend, John Dawson from ExactData. John, welcome to the video.
Yeah, good morning, Ed.
John, we're going to spend some time here helping consultants, cybersecurity consultants and IT consultants understand how synthetic data can be used to improve their revenue and sales. But before we get into that, because I do want to have you take consultants who are watching through this opportunity, just take a minute and tell us a little bit about the technology that you and your team create, and then we can get into the discussion.
Sure. My company specializes in synthetic data generation, which is basically generating data. It's usually used for test or dev, but also training purposes. And it's not derived from production data sources, so it's fully synthetic. That's actually a growing market. You're seeing 20% growth rates, I think, in this market space now. It has a spectrum of technologies. You have low fidelity at the low end. You can get free data generators. You're actually seeing an interesting trend, Ed, with AI technologies being used to generate synthetic data, where they'll analyze the production database and then generate a replica of that is mirrors it, is not doesn't have any of the production data elements. And then we tend to play on the high end where we're very high fidelity, so we can do things like future state or engineer errors into the data for in error rates and things like that. So that's basically what we do.
Well, you know that I've been a very, very big proponent of this area. You and I become good friends because I dug into this and thought this makes good sense for people watching who maybe are sort of new to this. The idea is that during development or POCs and in cybersecurity, those are two of the most common activities going on. Instead of using live production data, you use fake data, and you don't have to expose production to that threat. And for the life of me, I can't imagine why anybody would do anything but that. If they have other ways to do the testing without production, then I'm for that. That's fine. But what I'm against, literally religiously against, is when production teams are supplying data to developers that is not properly obfuscated, or there's all kinds of crazy ways that people kludge the protections there. It rarely works, and the only way I've ever seen that really solves that is the kinds of things that you and some of the folks, the participants in your segment of the industry. I think it's wonderful. I'm glad you're doing it because I really do think it reduces risk. So I think that's great.
Yeah, thank you.
Now, what you'd shared with me, basically a use case I'm going to ask you to talk about here that kind of prompted the video here. You've been telling us that a lot of consultants right now see this as an opportunity to enhance their ability to then go off to their clients and support their needs. Why don't you tell us a little bit about that? I know the primary folks watching this will be consultants, maybe cybersecurity consultants, at least looking to make a little more money. Why don't you talk to them and tell them how this area might be able to make them a little bit of extra money?
Sure, absolutely. We believe this is just a huge opportunity, and I'll just walk you through some of the math. And of course, this isn't exact, but most people agree it's roughly right. But if you take the software development market, Ed, it's in that $500 billion kind of a range, globally. According to NIST, 50% generally of software development for testing purposes, and a big chunk of that is for test data. So finding that as you go through a development cycle, you have to test the algorithms. If it's AI or anything you're developing, and so getting the data, getting the right use cases in the data is a big chunk of that. And those costs are typically buried in your development costs. They're very rarely called out, but sometimes they are. And so through the math, you're looking at maybe $150 billion annually that is just for test data, and it's all based on the majority, is vast majority is based on modifying production data sources. And a lot of times you're running the dev networks on the production networks, which is crazy. But fundamentally, they're running production data through these dev environments or doing their tests on the production networks. The ETL market, which is masking and low fidelity synthetics, maybe $10 billion, so a small chunk of that. And then if you get into the fully synthetic that does not involve production data, you're in the $100 million to $200 million range. So it's a very, very, very small piece of that. So you've got a big, big white space market out there of people that just by habit and who probably lack of knowledge. I mean, I rarely talk to people that are aware of alternatives. In fact, I haven't yet today that are just using production data. So this is a very, very large market opportunity. Tens, if not hundreds of billions of dollars.
Yeah, I think those numbers sound certainly directionally correct. And with the privacy initiatives that are popping up, it seems to me that that's just as important. Like, I'm not really sure what happens when production data might be somewhat obfuscated and then the TCPA and GDPR rules apply. I have a feeling there's going to be some use cases that create some lack of clarity. So the way to get around it is just use synthetic. That's how I would be doing it if I'm doing dev. Now, what sort of support do you guys provide the consultant? Like, would you guys, if a large or medium-sized consulting team came to you guys and said, hey, we like this, we'd like to recommend it, how do you normally work with the consulting team? What's been your typical engagement model with them?
Sure. Yeah, I'll kind of walk you through that a little bit, but generally these are high-end, very, very large, projects. As an example, Accenture has 80,000 people doing applications development, and it's a huge, huge operation.
That is big.
Verizon has 3,000 software developers, and on the federal side, there are hundreds of millions of dollars worth of contracts being done. So, the economics are, the way the economics work is that there's an upfront investment creating data models. But once the data models are created, the cost to generate the data is virtually zero. You're just using server time. And so if you look at traditional methods, the cost is linearly increases with the cost of software development. So if you envision an XY plot, your software test data costs would go at a 45-degree angle and an increase at the same rate as your software development costs, and able to continue like that. So the ROIs are very strong at a certain cost level, and generally that's $4 million annually in software development costs. I'm sorry, that's a break-even point. When you start to get in the $10 million range, it's a $2 million annual ROI, and then it just goes up from there. So it becomes very, very lucrative because you have a fixed cost on the test data, and you have a variable cost traditionally, and so you get into the volumes, and there's lots and lots of ROI there with these types of technologies, and that's basically how we make our money in this space. We're automating basically a fundamentally manual process. So there's an upfront cost, and then the cost virtually goes to zero, and so you can get a pretty strong ROI if the volumes are there.
It sure looks like with volumes and size, it's easy to do the math. Do you dip down to maybe some mid-market or more modest size programs? Seems like I've seen, I think I've heard you talk to some of the value in the smaller programs, not just the big monster ones, right?
We like to see above $5 million in development costs. So, in that market space, and above, it's very, very strong. Below that, they're better off using a different technology. As I mentioned, AI to convert to synthetic data, or a low-end, low-fidelity synthetic data generation technology. It just really, the economics don't make sense. Go-to-markets models, that's another interesting phenomena with this technology, is that the client actually pays for the development of the data models, and the consultant, or we actually sell the data as a service. So once we have the data models, we can sell those to other clients. We retain that intellectual property, so very, very leverageable. There's nice professional services dollars associated with this. Typically at commercial rates, typically operating at 70% margins. They're high margins because of the licensing fees associated with this, and the fact that you can leverage previous data models, makes it easy to leverage, collect the licensing fees, or much easier. And deal sizes are nice. I mean, in the small end, it's $1 million. Medium would be $3 million, and $8 million would be on your higher end, your enterprise type application. So, but there's nice margins, nice ROIs, and good money to be made here in what we believe is a huge white space market.
Yeah, also consultants are always looking for tech, right? They're looking for some sticky relationship with their clients, some sort of technology that can transcend, just the paper relationship. Do you find that they like that as sort of a complement to the consulting work that they're doing? I would think that would be very attractive, builds a stickier, more long-term relationship. Am I reading that right?
Yeah, absolutely. The engagements are multi-year, at least 3 years, 3 to 5 years. So typically you're in, and you can expand. It's a classic land and expand model where you'll go in at a program or a certain area within a large company, and then you'll expand out from there into different areas. Just one comment too on the deal size. We do have clients on the smaller end that aren't basing their ROI strictly on labor savings. They're also on removing the risk for their cybersecurity risks. They're doing it from a policy perspective. So those numbers I quoted on our ROI are just strictly based on the labor with test data. There's other savings too. That push them down in the lower software development type operations.
Excellent. Well, for those of you watching, if you are a consultant working in a larger engagement and you deal with dev teams and you think this is something that's a possibility for your portfolio, I hope you look into it. And John, if they're interested, what's the best way for them to be in touch with you and your team?
It's the website's www.ExactData, ExactData.net. It's net, not com.
.net, right? That's the ExactData is a common phrase, so you guys have the .net and that.
Yeah.
So we'll encourage people to visit the site and take a look at what you're doing. And John, you'll have to keep us posted on how you're doing in this sector. I think it's an exciting one, and I've always been a big admirer of you and your team. And I hope you guys keep up the great work.
Great, Ed, thank you.
You bet. And we'll see you all next time.